So for thousands of years, the story of Joseph and his coat of many colors has been read as this really straightforward parable, right?
Right. A boy, a pit, and a pharaoh.
Exactly. We all know the broad strokes. The prophetic dreams, the betrayal by the brothers, the whole rise to power in a foreign land.
It's one of those stories we just kind of take for granted.
Yeah, it's carved so deeply into our collective cultural memory that we tend to just walk past it, like an artifact in a museum. We just assume we already understand everything it has to tell us.
Which is a huge mistake.
It really is. Because think about it, what if you're dusting off that ancient museum artifact and suddenly you feel a warm, beating heart inside it?
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right. Like, what if we've just been looking at the wrong protagonist this whole time? What if, standing just outside the frame of this sweeping historical epic, there's a completely different story playing out?
A profoundly human story.
Yeah. One that transforms a familiar biblical account into this, deeply psychological thriller about cognitive dissonance, the really heavy price of foresight, and a high-stakes political romance.
It's a total paradigm shift.
It is. So welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are opening a fascinating piece of source material today that just shatters the glass on this ancient narrative.
I are looking specifically at excerpts from The Pharaoh's Nightmare.
Which is such a good title, by the way.
It really is. It's book 2 of the Priestess of Egypt trilogy by author Marin Cyrus. And Cyrus operates in this very specific, really bold space within historical fiction.
She takes massive risks.
She does. She takes these monumental classical narratives, in this case, the story of Joseph and his Egyptian wife, Asenath, and she sets it against the backdrop of ancient Egypt's 12th dynasty under Pharaoh Asenath II. But she fundamentally reimagines the point of access.
Right. She doesn't rewrite the actual historical or scriptural outcomes, though.
No, not at all. The famine still happens. The political ascension still occurs. But she radically shifts the perspective. She places the camera, so to speak, firmly behind the eyes of a fiercely intelligent, deeply conflicted woman.
Asenath.
Exactly. A woman who has traditionally just been relegated to a mere footnote in the text.
It's amazing. She takes a narrative that is, completely dominated by patriarchs and kings,
Yeah.
and hands the reins over to Asenath. And what we get is not just a retelling. It's like a total autopsy of power, trauma, and faith.
An autopsy is the perfect word for it.
Through Asenath's eyes, we are forced to examine the terrifying reality of waking up to the hypocrisy of your own religious institutions.
And your social institutions, too.
Yeah. We watch this intersection of profound personal trauma and massive global politics, and we dissect what it actually takes on a logistical level to govern a civilization that is completely blind to its own impending doom.
It's heavy stuff.
It's so heavy. But what I find so structurally brilliant about how Cyrus begins this book is that she totally delays the gratification.
She doesn't start in Egypt.
No.
Yeah.
We don't start in the sprawling golden capital. We start in the dust. We begin in Canaan, establishing the raw, bleeding, emotional stakes of the story before we even see our main characters in their present timeline.
The prologue is it functions as a masterclass in establishing emotional resonance through stasis.
Stasis is right. It's so stagnant.
The setting is the encampment in Hebron, and the timeline is really critical here. It has been exactly 9 years since Jacob's favored son, Joseph, disappeared.
9 whole years.
9 years since the older brothers returned with that infamous blood-soaked coat. Cyrus forces you, the reader, to sit in the anatomy of stagnant grief.
We find Jacob just sitting alone in his tent.
Yeah, and the author builds the scene using these incredibly indifferent sensory details. Outside, the camp is moving on. Women are grinding grain. A child is crying in the distance. A donkey brays.
Life is just continuing.
Which is the ultimate insult to a grieving parent.
Oh, absolutely. And inside the tent, Jacob has the coat hidden away. It's wrapped in linen, shoved under a cedar chest, resting beneath a blanket that still smells faintly of the smoke from their old campfires.
And when he finally pulls it out, the physical description of the coat itself tells a story.
It's not just like a vibrant piece of clothing anymore.
No. Jacob's thumb traces these darkened, stiffened stains near the breast and the sleeve. And the author notes that the coat is particularly narrow at the wrists.
Which is such a heartbreaking detail.
Right, because Jacob remembers that Joseph used to squirm and twist while his father was trying to measure him for it.
God, that hurts.
It has these bright strips of woven dye, red, brown, blue. But even after almost a decade, the sight of those dark ridges of blood hits Jacob like a physical strike to the ribs.
And then this quiet, devastating moment is interrupted by Benjamin entering the tent.
Who is 13 now.
Right. That means he was barely 4 years old when Joseph vanished. He has no real memory of his older brother, only the mythology of him.
Which prompts Benjamin to ask the question that basically sets the psychological tone for the entire book.
What was he like?
Yeah. And the way Jacob answers is intensely revealing. He completely bypasses the usual platitudes of a grieving father.
He doesn't just say, "Oh, Joseph was a good boy."
Exactly. He describes a specific, dangerous kind of intellect. Jacob says Joseph was restless in his mind. He asked endless probing questions.
He needed to understand the mechanics of the world.
Right. Why a sheep took a specific path down a ridge where the servants were originally born, how the camp functioned on a granular level.
And more importantly, Jacob notes that Joseph possessed this uncanny ability to read people.
He could look at a man, hear him speak a single sentence, and know instantly if that man was hiding something.
Which is terrifying to be around.
Jacob explicitly states that this specific gift, the burden of seeing too much, is precisely what made his brothers hate him.
It sets up Joseph not just as the favorite, but as an uncomfortable presence, someone whose sheer perceptiveness was a threat to the family's status quo.
But then we reach the pivotal moment of the prologue, the realization that completely rewrites Jacob's reality.
This scene is wild.
Jacob looks down at the blood on the coat. It's been 9 years. The stain has dried, cracked, and formed these dark, brittle ridges. A small clot flakes off into his hand.
And Jacob, who has lived his entire life as a nomadic shepherd, a man who knows the scent of iron, lanolin, and slaughtered livestock, finally looks at this physical evidence critically.
He performs a rudimentary but definitive forensic test.
Basically, ancient CSI.
Pretty much. He takes a fresh smear of sheep's blood from a basin just outside the tent blood from the morning slaughter, and he sets it beside a bowl of clean water.
Okay.
He drops the fresh, tacky sheep's blood onto a scrap of wool. It stays thick, dark, holding its shape on the fibers.
Right.
Then he takes that 9-year-old dried clot from Joseph's coat and drops it directly into the water.
And the visual that follows just shatters a decade of mourning.
The clot from the coat uncurls, it sinks, it feathers and dissolves into the water almost immediately.
It behaves completely differently than human blood would under similar conditions.
Exactly. It definitively proves that the brothers used animal blood to fake the death.
Jacob crushes the fabric in his fist, looks out at the empty tent, and whispers, "What did you bring me?"
It gives me chills. It is a chilling unblinding.
Yeah.
It's a profound demonstration of how grief functions as a literal cognitive blinder.
Right, because why didn't see it before?
Well, the text notes that when the brothers first brought that coat to Jacob 9 years prior, he was struck down by grief faster than thought.
Faster than thought.
We are looking at a massive trauma response. When a human being is subjected to sudden, catastrophic shock like being presented with the physical evidence of their child's violent death, the amygdala essentially hijacks the entire system.
The brain's threat processing center.
Exactly. It overrides the prefrontal cortex, which is the region responsible for logic, critical thinking, and expert analysis. Jacob couldn't analyze the blood because his brain was literally incapable of cognitive reasoning in that moment.
Okay, I hear you. I understand the psychology of trauma, and the concept of an amygdala hijack makes sense on paper. But as a reader, I have to push back hard on this premise.
Okay, let's hear it.
Jacob is a patriarch of a pastoral society. The text explicitly reminds us that he has delivered wet, kicking lambs with his bare hands. He has slaughtered sheep at the altar. He has bound up the torn flesh of his flocks.
He's an expert.
The scent, texture, and behavior of sheep's blood is likely more familiar to him than his own reflection. Are we really supposed to suspend our disbelief that a master shepherd, holding a garment soaked in sheep's blood, wouldn't subconsciously register that something was wrong on day one?
It's a fair question.
I mean, the muscle memory alone should have triggered a red flag.
The skepticism is absolutely warranted, and I think it's a tension the author deliberately cultivates.
How so?
It's not just a matter of the amygdala shutting down his logic. It's about the insidious nature of collective deception and psychological priming.
Priming.
Think about it. The brothers didn't just toss the coat at him in silence. They presented it with a highly specific framing. They said, examine it. See whether it is your son's robe.
Ah, they weaponized his own authority against him.
Exactly. They primed his brain to look for confirmation of a tragedy, not to conduct an impartial investigation.
Right, because why would his own sons lie about something so horrific?
Exactly. When you combine the visual of the coat, which undeniably belonged to Joseph, with the sheer magnitude of the horror, the brain forcefully fills in the gaps. He breathed in the scent of blood, the dust of the road, and perhaps the lingering ghost of the oil Rachel used to put in Joseph's hair. And his mind constructed the reality the brothers wanted him to see.
So the deceit relies entirely on his emotional inability to question the lie in the exact moment it's presented. His expertise wasn't just offline, it was actively suppressed by the narrative his sons fed him.
Precisely. And the author acknowledges this timeline beautifully. The text says, "Now grief was old enough to leave room for other things."
It took 9 years of slow, agonizing processing for the initial shock to decay enough that his analytical mind could finally re-engage.
The illusion wasn't perfect. It just required a victim who was too devastated to look closely.
Man, and that concept of a victim being unable to look closely at a fabricated reality provides the absolute perfect thematic bridge into the main narrative.
Yes, it does.
Because we leave the dusty physical deception in the tents of Canaan, and we are thrust directly into a massive systemic spiritual and societal deception happening in the glittering capital of Egypt.
It's a brilliant pivot.
We move from a father blinded by grief to a young woman blinded by privilege.
The transition is jarring in the best way possible. We are introduced to Asenath, and her environment is the absolute antithesis of Jacob's tent.
Complete opposite.
She is the daughter of Potiphar, the high priest of Ra at Heliopolis. In the 12th dynasty, this is an incredibly prestigious, politically insulated position.
She lives in a world of fine white linen, golden jewelry, heavy incense,
and the pervasive, blinding light of the sun god. Her entire existence is built on the theology of order, or ma'at, maintained by the priesthood. But when we first meet her, she is kneeling at the sacred altar, and she is failing.
She is trying to recite the daily prayers. The words "Great Ra," "Bar of Light," are supposed to be second nature to her, but they feel like ash in her mouth.
You can't do it.
She is staring up at the impassive golden face of the deity, but her internal vision is completely consumed by the image of a man in iron. A man whose wrists are being bitten by heavy chains in the dark. Joseph.
She is experiencing a total collapse of her worldview.
And in her society, a crisis of faith is not just a private, personal journey.
Not at all. It is a dangerous political liability. The temple is an arm of the state. To question the gods is to question the Pharaoh, and to question the Pharaoh is treason.
Treason, right.
This reality is brought to her doorstep by Sebate, a fellow priestess and someone Asenath grew up with.
Sebate represents the institutional status quo.
Very much so. She approaches Asenath and warns her that her internal unraveling is becoming externally visible. The servants are whispering.
They always do.
They see Asenath up late, reading foreign scrolls by lamplight, dissatisfied with the wisdom of her own culture. Sebate delivers this incredibly sharp warning. She says, "You wear doubt badly."
You wear doubt badly. And Asenath's response to that warning is one of my favorite lines in the text. She looks at Sebate and says, "As long as truth stands, it does not fear questions."
It is a radically dangerous philosophy to vocalize in a theocracy.
Completely.
To the institution, questioning is inherently destructive because the institution's power relies on absolute, unquestioned compliance. Sebate reminds her that if the higher authorities begin to question her loyalty, it will not end with whispers.
The threat of violence, of being stripped of her rank or worse, is just hovering right below the surface of this polite conversation.
The author is laying bare the conflict between institutional religion, which demands conformity, and personal truth, which demands rigorous, often painful investigation.
Asenath is waking up to the possibility that the massive golden structure she has dedicated her life to might actually be an apparatus of control, rather than a conduit for divine truth.
And what accelerates this internal rebellion is the factual truth she uncovers about why Joseph is in chains to begin with.
Enter Hagar.
Yes.
Yes.
Hagar, Asenath's Ethiopian servant and her most trusted confidant, acts as the intelligence gatherer here.
She bypasses the official narrative.
Completely. She taps into the invisible network of servants operating across the sprawling estates, and she brings back the reality. Joseph was not imprisoned for attacking his master's wife.
No.
He is imprisoned because Kamweset, Potiphar's wife, demanded he sleep with her, and he refused.
The kitchen gossip Hagar relays is vital. Joseph fled from Kamweset, because he explicitly stated he would not do such a great evil against his master and his God.
And Hagar, who possesses this deep, cynical wisdom about human nature and power dynamics, adds her own analysis.
What does she say?
She suggests that a man in Joseph's vulnerable position, a slave, does not refuse a powerful, wealthy, beautiful woman unless his internal architecture is completely claimed by something immovable.
Right.
In this case, it is his profound spiritual integrity and his devotion to his unseen God.
But Hagar doesn't just bring rumors. She brings actionable intelligence. She has located him.
Yeah.
Joseph isn't in the common labor pits, which were essentially death camps where men were worked until their bodies broke. He's been placed in the royal prison.
And the way Hagar discovers this is such a brilliant, quiet subplot.
Tell him about the guard.
Right, so she recognized the guard working the prison gate. It was a man from her own homeland, a boy she had known from a slave cart 30 years prior.
30 years.
They had both been swept up in the machinery of an empire, displaced, aged by decades of labor, and yet the moment they locked eyes, they recognized each other.
It highlights the invisible humanity operating beneath the notice of the Egyptian elite.
Exactly, and that shared history allows Hagar to engineer a bribe and secure a way into the prison. But it comes with a strict condition.
Asenath cannot simply walk in as the daughter of the high priest.
The optics would be catastrophic. She would likely be denied entry or targeted. She has to shed her societal identity.
And this introduces a recurring motif that Cyrus weaves throughout the entire book, the physical and metaphorical shedding of layers.
Hagar brings Asenath these coarse, scratchy linen garments. She forces Asenath to wipe the heavy kohl from her eyes. She removes the gold bands from her arms.
Asenath has to disguise herself as a lowly, common temple worker. The kind who roam the city offering standard, generic blessings and meager food to the imprisoned in exchange for copper.
The moment Asenath puts on that rough linen, it's a total shock to her system. The fabric physically scratches her skin, acting as a constant abrasive reminder of her new reality.
It's the first time in her life she has truly felt the texture of poverty.
As she navigates the streets of the city, moving away from the manicured temple districts and toward the prison, she experiences a massive paradigm shift.
She sees old men with scarred hands begging outside temple gates.
Temples that hold enough hoarded grain and gold to feed the entire district for a month.
The scales are just falling from her eyes.
And the ultimate shattering of her worldview occurs during this walk. A common street merchant spots her temple garb.
Right.
He doesn't bow. He doesn't offer reverence. Instead, he calls out casually, "Blessings for sale."
Blessings for sale.
He asks if she is peddling prayers to ward off the evil eye, or if she has cheap charms to guarantee a prosperous market day. He assumes she is just another religious vendor hawking spiritual wares for a few copper coins.
It's a very modern problem, actually. It's like that feeling when you work for a company with a beautifully written mission statement on the wall. A company that constantly talks about changing the world and elevating humanity.
Oh.
But then you actually walk down to the supply chain. Or you look at how the lower level employees are treated, or you talk to the demographic your company supposedly serves, and you realize you aren't saving anyone.
You're just extracting value.
Exactly. You're selling overpriced charms. That is exactly what Asenath is experiencing. To her, the Temple of Ra is sacred. The rituals are the very fabric holding the universe together. But to the people on the street, it's just a cynical transactional economy.
The disconnect between the insulated theology of the elite class and the brutal, everyday reality of the populace is absolute.
Absolute.
Asenath is paralyzed by the realization that her sacred life's work has no practical, compassionate application for the suffering people directly outside her gates. The religion she serves is a luxury of the rich, not a sanctuary for the broken.
And that realization burns away the last of her hesitation. She arrives at the royal prison, and the sensory shift from the temple is violently abrupt.
She leaves behind the scent of lotus flowers, roasted meats, and frankincense.
And steps into a subterranean world of damp stone, iron, and the sour breath of desperate men in the dark.
The auditory landscape is horrific. Men are thrusting their chained wrists through bars, begging for a touch of oil, some laughing maniacally into the shadows, others simply weeping for water.
But because she is veiled, and because Hagar arranged the bribe, the guard directs her past the general holding cells and toward the scribe room.
Right, because Khnum, the chief jailer, is a pragmatist.
He is.
He recognized very early on that Joseph possessed immense administrative and organizational talent. Rather than letting him rot in a cell, Khnum put him to work keeping the prison records, managing the rations, and organizing the chaos.
Which sets the stage for their reunion in the scribe room.
This scene is so incredibly restrained, which is what makes it so devastating.
Yeah.
And Asenath steps into this dusty, dimly lit room filled with stacks of papyrus scrolls. Joseph is sitting at a table. He turns. There is no sweeping cinematic music, no dramatic proclamations.
It's just two people separated by the brutal reality of their circumstances.
The intimacy is conveyed through tiny, specific details. He recognizes her instantly, despite the coarse linen and the veil.
He stands up, moves to the iron bar separating them, and reaches through.
His hand covers hers. He gently presses her palm against his rough, bearded cheek. The author notes a single tear gathering at his eye.
And Asenath lets out a sound that is caught somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Standing in the middle of this terrible, suffocating place, she realizes she has come too late to hide her love, and she has traveled too far to deny it.
And then she gives him the offering she brought. It isn't gold. It isn't a bribe for his release, because she has no power to grant that.
No.
It isn't even fine food. It is a roughly carved wooden bird.
The author describes it so vividly. The wood is worn, the wings are spread wide, and its head is turned skyward. She slides it through the bars into his hand and whispers, "I sometimes use my hands to express what my lips cannot say."
The symbolism of the wooden bird is layered. In ancient Egypt, wood was a precious commodity, often imported and highly valued. But a rough carving like this represents something more fundamental. It represents hope. It is the very concept Joseph taught her when he was still a slave in Potiphar's household, before the false accusations.
Right. He taught her that hope can survive any external circumstance, even slavery, even a dungeon.
Exactly. If it is rooted in an internal divine truth rather than the shifting sands of human expectations, she is returning his own lesson to him when he needs it most.
It is a pure, undistilled connection. But the author doesn't let Asenath linger in this romantic realization for long.
Not at all.
The narrative immediately snaps her back to reality and forces her to contrast this love with the path of least resistance. Asenath returns to her luxurious estate, and her father, Pharoah, drops a political bombshell.
He has arranged the ultimate Egyptian success story for her.
He presents a marriage proposal from General Qumheb.
We need to analyze Qumheb carefully, because Cyrus makes a very smart narrative choice here. She does not make the general a villain.
Right, which would be the easy way out.
If Qumheb were cruel or arrogant, Asenath's choice would be easy. But he is a genuine, highly decorated war hero of the 12th dynasty.
The text describes him as devastatingly handsome, broad-shouldered, his skin bronzed from the sun and military campaigns.
He wears the golden armor of Pharaoh's favor. He is wealthy, he is honorable, and he treats Asenath with immense respect.
Potiphar is ecstatic, boasting that a union with this man will guarantee that Asenath's children will be raised as princes of Egypt.
From an objective societal standpoint, any noble woman in Egypt would kill for this match.
It offers an ironclad guarantee of absolute security, top-tier social status, and a life insulated from any material hardship. But to Asenath, the prospect feels like a velvet noose.
A velvet noose. That's exactly it.
She retreats to her private chamber, dismisses her servants, and sits before her polished bronze mirror. She stares at her own reflection and asks herself the defining question: why does my heart choose suffering over success?
It is a profound psychological inquiry into the nature of desire and value systems. Why do we sometimes feel a fundamental, visceral rejection of the exact things society insists we should want?
Right.
Egyptian noble society was constructed entirely on the mathematics of strategic alliances. Marriage was not about romance. It was a mechanism for consolidating land, power, and political stability.
Potiphar is operating perfectly within the logic of his culture.
But Asenath is undergoing a massive internal value shift. She is no longer measuring worth by Egyptian standards. When she looks at Qumheb, she sees imperial power and comfortable conformity.
And when she looks at Joseph, a man thinned by prison rations, scarred by betrayal, stripped of all earthly agency, she sees unyielding truth and a character that cannot be broken by circumstance.
Exactly.
I want to ask you, the listener, to really visualize this choice for a second. Imagine you are offered a completely guaranteed life, a life where you will never, ever have to worry about resources. You will be respected, even feared, everywhere you go.
You are partnered with someone who is genuinely honorable.
And objectively attractive. The golden, frictionless path is laid out right in front of you. Would you have the psychological fortitude to look at that path and throw it all away?
It's a huge question.
To face the absolute fury of your family, the sudden loss of your wealth, the whispers of your peers, all for a disgraced, imprisoned slave who owns absolutely nothing. Would you risk complete societal ruin simply because that person possessed a spiritual wisdom that resonated with the deepest, most authentic part of your soul?
It is a terrifying precipice to stand on.
Julie.
It is the ultimate crucible for her character. And because Asenath cannot bring herself to lie, because she flatly refuses to conform to her father's political ambitions and accept the general, we move into the immediate fallout.
Right. Potiphar is a seasoned political operator. He is no fool.
He observes his daughter's persistent melancholy, her dangerous questioning, and he deduces that her heart has been captured by the Hebrew slave.
And he reacts the way powerful men have historically reacted when they feel their control slipping. He removes the variable.
He exercises his absolute patriarchal authority and exiles her.
He sends her away to the Upper Temple Estate, a remote facility far from the capital, far from the prison, for 2 years.
Hagar watches this unfold and delivers this incredibly sharp piece of analysis regarding Potiphar's motivations. She says, "Men who live by honor fear love when it refuses to bow."
Men who live by honor fear love when it refuses to bow. That single line perfectly encapsulates the deep-seated anxiety of the ancient patriarchal structure.
Love is inherently chaotic. When love cannot be leveraged, managed, or traded for political gain, it becomes a direct threat to the established order.
So, Asenath is banished. For 2 years, she is forced into the quiet, monotonous rhythms of a distant estate.
But this period of isolation provides the space for a fascinating philosophical debate between Asenath and the high priestess of the estate.
Asenath is standing on a terrace overlooking the Nile, and she just lets her guard down. She expresses her deep, bitter cynicism about the entire system of Egyptian marriage.
She essentially argues that men make the arrangements, fathers speak grandly of honor and duty, and women are simply expected to be grateful currency.
She asserts that true romantic love is a myth that cannot survive the brutal reality of their political structure.
But the high priestess doesn't let her wallow in that cynicism. And here, the author's deep research into Egyptian antiquity really shines through.
Yes, I loved this part.
The priestess challenges Asenath, pointing out that Egyptian culture, beneath its rigid political structures, is actually saturated with romantic longing and deep emotional attachment.
The priestess tells Asenath to look closer at the world around her, to read the love poetry written on papyrus fragments,
to examine the intricate tomb paintings where husbands and wives are depicted, seated knee to knee, the wife's hand resting tenderly on the husband's shoulder.
The priestess delivers this haunting line. We bury the beloved with the beloved because no one wishes to cross into the next life alone. The priestess sees right through the defensive armor of Asenath's cynicism. She recognizes that Asenath isn't truly rejecting the concept of love. She is aggressively mourning a specific love she believes she has permanently lost.
And while Asenath is enduring this quiet exile, holding fast to her internal truth, the massive geopolitical wheels of destiny are beginning to turn back in the capital.
The dreams.
The Pharaoh begins to suffer from his legendary, terrifying dreams. The fat cows devoured by the lean cows, the healthy ears of grain swallowed by the blighted ears.
And the court magicians and seers completely failed to provide an interpretation.
Finally, the cupbearer, whose own life Joseph had accurately predicted in the prison, remembers the Hebrew slave.
Joseph is hastily brought from the dungeon. He is shaved, given clean linen, and brought before the most powerful man on earth.
He not only interprets the dreams, accurately predicting 7 years of unprecedented agricultural abundance, followed by 7 years of catastrophic global famine, but he immediately outlines a sweeping macroeconomic plan to save the empire.
And in a matter of hours, Joseph's reality is completely rewritten. He is elevated to the position of vizier. He is given the Egyptian name Zaphenath-Paneah.
The speed of the ascension is dizzying, almost violent. He goes from being a forgotten prisoner managing scribe scrolls to becoming the second most powerful man in the known world, given absolute authority over the nation's infrastructure.
But the Pharaoh and the queen recognize a vital political vulnerability. A man in this position, particularly a foreigner with a criminal record, cannot govern effectively without an anchor to the established Egyptian nobility.
He needs a high-status wife, not just a figurehead, but a woman who intimately understands the complex etiquette of the court.
Someone who can navigate the treacherous political waters, and who can legitimize his sudden authority in the eyes of the priesthood and the nomarchs.
So the queen announces that she will summon the court matchmakers to find a suitable candidate.
And in this incredible twist of divine providence, or just the sheer gravitational pull of fate, Asenath is summoned back from her exile as a potential candidate.
She is brought back to the capital, completely unaware of who the new vizier actually is.
She is led through the massive, imposing halls of the Memphis palace. The air is thick with heavy incense. The walls are painted with towering, vibrant depictions of gods and military conquests.
And she keeps her head bowed, her eyes fixed on the polished stone floor, expecting to be introduced to some elderly, entrenched bureaucrat or an arrogant nobleman she will be forced to tolerate.
The reunion scene that follows is arguably the emotional climax of the book's first half.
Oh, without a doubt. It is stripped of all the bombast of the royal court. She is standing there, waiting in silent resignation. A man approaches. He doesn't speak. He simply takes her hand.
And before she even has a chance to raise her eyes, he presses an object into her palm.
It's the wooden bird.
She feels the rough, worn edges of the carved wings against her skin.
The tactile memory short-circuits her brain before her eyes can even confirm the impossible reality. She looks up, and there is Joseph.
No longer in iron, but draped in the fine linen of a vizier.
The sheer, overwhelming relief, the collision of disbelief and joy in this scene is just palpable. He reaches out and gently traces the line of her cheekbone, almost as if he is testing the reality of her presence.
Half expecting that his own grief and exhaustion had simply hallucinated her.
And the way Cyrus writes the kiss that follows is incredibly cinematic, yet deeply grounded. It doesn't start with desperate passion. It starts slow, with profound wonder and hesitation.
It is the careful, almost reverent joy of a man touching something he had accepted was lost to him forever. But then the dam breaks. The longing overtakes them.
The text beautifully states that the kiss holds 2 years of waiting. Every whispered prayer, every fractured memory, every grief, every stubborn, impossible hope.
In that singular moment, the massive palace, the gold, the intricate politics of the court, it all just dissolves. It is just the two of them finally allowed to breathe the same air and the light.
The thematic payoff here is immensely satisfying. Asenath's willingness to be faithful to her own heart, her endurance of the isolation, and the stripping away of her societal status during her exile is perfectly, harmoniously mirrored by Joseph's own harrowing journey through the pit and the prison.
Both characters had to endure total darkness. Both had to remain fiercely true to their internal, moral, and spiritual compasses,
resisting every temptation to compromise in order to be ready for this exact, highly specific moment of elevation.
And that elevation requires a final, definitive break from the past. The political match has been decreed by the Pharaoh, which carries a beautiful irony because it is the exact match their hearts had chosen in secret years ago.
But before the massive state-sponsored wedding can take place, Asenath knows she must formally, intimately separate herself from her old life and her old gods.
She returns to her private chambers within the Temple of Ra for the last time. The sacred incense is burning. The ceiling above her is intricately painted with the journey of the sun god's solar bark across the sky.
But as she looks at it, she realizes these images are no longer sacred to her. They are just beautiful, empty stories, devoid of the living, divine presence she has recognized in the God of Joseph.
She summons her father, Pharoah. She doesn't yell or argue. With an eerie, absolute calm, she tells him, "I cannot serve two masters, and so I choose the one."
It is a quiet but utterly seismic rebellion against everything she was raised to revere.
With steady hands, she reaches up to her neck and unclasps the heavy golden collar, an artifact that had belonged to her grandmother, a piece passed down through generations of high priestesses. She sets it down on the stone altar.
Then she reaches into her hair and unpins the golden uraeus, the sacred serpent that symbolizes divine authority and protection. She places it beside the collar.
She is physically and metaphorically dismantling her identity as a daughter of Ra.
It is an act of profound courage and theological finality. The uraeus in Egyptian culture was not just jewelry. It was a physical manifestation of the goddess Wadjet, meant to spit fire at the enemies of the state. By removing it, she is declaring herself outside that system of protection and control.
And this deliberate shedding clears the way for the wedding itself, which Cyrus describes as a massive, sprawling cultural collision.
It is a state event designed to project stability. The descriptions of the feast are lavish long tables groaning under the weight of roasted water birds, honey-drenched cakes, fresh figs, and deep red wine.
Musicians are playing lutes and harps, acrobats and dancers are spinning beneath brightly dyed awnings. It's the full, intoxicating display of Egyptian grandeur.
And amidst all this highly choreographed public triumph, we get this beautiful, deeply human moment where Hagar, Asenath's fiercely loyal servant, is weeping tears of absolute unfiltered joy.
She's crying so hard that she's completely ruined her elaborate kohl makeup.
She pulls Asenath aside and tells her, "You were faithful to God in the dark, and he was faithful back to you in the light."
But the real strength of the writing emerges in the contrast between that loud public spectacle and the profound private reality that follows. The feast eventually ends. The dignitaries go home. Asenath and Joseph retreat to the royal chambers.
They step out onto a balcony that overlooks the shimmering, moonlit expanse of the Nile. And here, in the sudden quiet, the vulnerability sets in.
Joseph, the newly minted vizier, the man who literally holds the fate and survival of millions in his hands, is suddenly gripped by intense terror.
He turns to her and confesses his fear. He says, "I've been alone for so long, surrounded by men who wanted to use me or break me. I don't know how to be a husband. I am terrified I will disappoint you."
He is deeply afraid that when she truly sees him, when she sees the physical and psychological scars carved into him by his brothers in the pit, by the slave drivers on the auction block, and by the chains in the royal prison, she will find him ruined.
Unworthy of her unbroken nobility. He admits he never dared to dream he would have a wife who could look past his scars to find something worth loving.
And Asenath's response is the perfect culmination of her character arc. She steps closer to him and says, "Your scars are proof of your survival and your strength. They are not signs of weakness."
As they begin to undress each other, Cyrus explicitly frames the physical removal of their clothing as the discarding of their societal armor.
Joseph's heavy, authoritative sash, the complex layers of fine linen, they fall away like barriers. The author writes that these layers are gently set aside, not discarded with disdain, but honored for what they are and then moved past.
It is a profound, beautifully written exploration of cultural bridge building and radical vulnerability. True intimacy, the genuine joining of these two vastly different worlds, the traumatized Hebrew slave and the privileged Egyptian noblewoman, requires absolute, terrifying transparency.
Skin meets skin with the quiet, reverent awe of discovery.
The author focuses intensely on the emotional courage required to allow oneself to be truly seen after spending years forced to hide behind walls of self-preservation and political disguise. It is the ultimate act of trust.
It is a beautiful culmination of their romance. But as we know, love doesn't exist in a vacuum. The quiet sanctuary of the honeymoon suite doesn't last forever.
They wake up the next morning and they have an entire civilization to save from annihilation.
Which plunges us directly into the deep waters of the political thriller aspect of the book. The romance is secured, but the survival of Egypt is not.
The prophesied 7 years of plenty have officially begun, and Joseph faces the monumental, almost impossible logistical task of centralizing the agricultural output of an ancient, decentralized empire.
He is imposing massive, unprecedented quotas. He is demanding 20% of all harvests.
To enforce this, he has to pull labor from lucrative artisan workshops. He is diverting massive amounts of cut stone and timber away from elite building contracts to hastily construct thousands of massive reinforced granaries across the country.
And he is sealing this immense surplus under central government record, locking it away. And predictably, this aggressive restructuring of the economy violently angers the local merchants, the regional nomarchs, and the entrenched nobility.
We see the mechanics of this resistance play out vividly in the traders' quarter of the city. Amenemheb, an ambitious, ruthless slave trader and political schemer, is holding court in a shaded vineyard.
He is essentially acting as a lobbyist, whispering poison into the ears of the spice traders, the wool merchants, and the wealthy estate factors.
He is actively questioning the entire premise of Joseph's sweeping economic program. He points to the overflowing fields, the bursting storehouses, and asks, "The harvest is stronger than it has been in a generation. Since when does one unusually rich season justify remaking the fundamental laws of the kingdom?"
He accuses Joseph of using a fabricated prophecy to build a machine of absolute, totalitarian control, placing food distribution, labor movement, and emergency supply entirely into one set of foreign hands.
It is a textbook political power struggle. The merchants and the regional lords are entirely focused on their immediate profit margins, their seasonal trade routes, and the gold in their strongboxes.
They cannot comprehend the long-term vision because they do not possess the prophetic knowledge.
Joseph is carrying the immense, crushing, isolating burden of foresight. Earlier in the narrative, while still in the dungeon, he had a conversation with his jailer, Num. He told Kunum that knowing the future is often a curse, not a blessing.
Right.
He asked, "To know a man will die before he does, to carry warnings that no one can bear to hear until the disaster is already upon them. What good is wisdom that stays locked up in your own head?"
Now, his wisdom is unleashed on a national scale, but to implement it, to actually save these people, he has to become the enemy of the very population he's trying to protect. He has to enforce harsh, unforgiving austerity during a time of unprecedented visible abundance.
And I love that Asenath isn't just sitting back in the palace weaving tapestries while he fights these battles. She is right there in the administrative trenches with him.
She steps fully into her role as his political partner.
There is this incredibly tense scene where they are sitting in a massive administrative chamber, facing down a cabal of hostile senior officials led by a man named Usurka. Usurka is trying to drown Joseph in bureaucratic objections.
And Asenath, using her extensive, rigorous temple training in logistics, supply chain management, and resource allocation, completely dismantles their arguments.
She leans forward, looks Usurka in the eye, and tells him with icy, unshakable calm that mathematical precision tends to reveal the harsh truths that diplomatic courtesy often obscures.
She is a fierce intellect. She validates her own religious and cultural transition by proving that her mind and her administrative skills are vital, indispensable assets to the survival of the state.
She proves to the court and to the reader that she is not a political trophy wife acquired for optics. She's a co-architect of Egypt's salvation. She understands the complex math of desiccation, grain storage, and distribution logistics just as well as the scribes.
And amidst this intense, grueling political pressure, they also begin the deeply personal work of building their family.
Yes, the birth of their two sons. First, Manasseh, whose name Joseph chooses because it means, "God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house."
And then a few years later, Ephraim. The scene surrounding Ephraim's birth is incredibly moving and heavy with dramatic irony.
Asenath is in the birthing chamber, sweating, exhausted, acutely aware that she is bringing a vulnerable child into a world that is hurtling toward a global environmental catastrophe.
But when Joseph holds the child, he names him Ephraim, which translates to fruitfulness.
He explains to Asenath that the name represents fruitfulness specifically in the land of suffering. It is a bold, almost defiant declaration of faith.
It's a statement that divine blessing and human resilience can multiply, even when all external conditions suggest decrease, starvation, and diminishment.
It is a theological stake driven deep into the ground. They are consciously choosing to believe in generation, in the future, while standing on the precipice of famine. But I want to pause on the broader political reality of what they are executing during these 7 years, because it is incredibly complex and morally ambiguous.
I was hoping we would dig into this, because as modern readers, we really have to ask the hard question. Is Joseph acting as a savior, or is he acting as an authoritarian dictator?
It's a great question.
Think about the mechanics of what he is doing. He is using the absolute, unquestionable military power of the Pharaoh to seize private agricultural assets. He is taking a massive 20% cut of every farmer's harvest, conscripting free labor to build state facilities, and completely monopolizing the transport and sale of food.
If you look at it strictly from the perspective of Amenemheb and the local merchants, it looks exactly like a tyrannical, power-hungry government overreach. He is destroying the free market.
It is a fascinating, deeply uncomfortable moral gray area that the author forces us to confront. Joseph is utilizing autocratic methods that inherently strip away individual economic freedom and centralize wealth to prevent a future apocalyptic humanitarian crisis.
He knows with divine certainty that the famine will kill millions if he doesn't act with absolute, unwavering, and sometimes brutal authority right now.
But the populace doesn't know that. They haven't seen the dreams. To them, he is a foreign tyrant, hoarding the nation's wealth while they sweat in the fields.
It raises profound philosophical questions about the ethics of governance. When does the end truly justify the means? How do you ethically govern a population that is blissfully blind to the cliff they are walking toward? Do you let them keep their freedom and starve, or do you take their freedom to ensure they survive?
It is the kind of ethical dilemma that keeps you up at night, and Cyrus handles it with incredible nuance. But just as Joseph and Asenath master the mechanics of the Egyptian economy and navigate these massive geopolitical challenges, the past, which they thought was securely buried under years of success, comes knocking violently at the gates.
The 7 years of plenty finally run out. The famine begins, exactly as predicted. It spreads its dry, suffocating fingers across the ancient world, withering crops not just in Egypt, but across the surrounding nations.
General Kameheb, who has remained a loyal military commander, comes to Joseph's chambers with an official border report.
He states that desperate buyers from far away have arrived at the eastern gates seeking to purchase grain from the state vaults. And then Kemheb casually says the word Canaan.
And Joseph's reaction to that single word is visceral, immediate, and terrifying. The text notes that the physical room doesn't change, the men around him don't see him flinch, but inside his mind, something old, deep, and heavy turns over violently, like a buried stone being struck by a plow.
He is instantly plunged into a massive trauma flashback. The golden walls of his office vanish. He sees the dry, cracked dust of the Canaanite roads. He smells the goat pens. He feels the terrifying edge of the pit under his heels.
He hears the rhythmic chanting of the auction block. He sees Benjamin's small, innocent hand reaching for him. And he sees the 10 dark shadows of his brothers standing in a circle where there should have been familial safety.
It is a brilliant, highly realistic depiction of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Joseph has accumulated all the power in the known world. He has a fiercely loving wife, beautiful, healthy children, the absolute respect of a king, and control over the global food supply.
But the mere mention of the word Canaan bypasses all of that carefully constructed armor and strikes directly at the original unhealed wound.
In the author's note at the end of the book, Marin Cyrus explicitly states that her primary thematic interest is exploring the nature of resilience against relentless adversity. And here, she powerfully demonstrates that true resilience isn't simply about surviving the initial trauma.
Survive the physical violence of the pit or the degradation of slavery?
Right. True resilience is the agonizing, ongoing work of surviving the echoes of that trauma when it resurfaces years later in a moment when you finally thought you were safe.
That night, Joseph is completely unspooled. He cannot sleep. He leaves his bed and stands out on the high palace balcony looking out over the dark ribbon of the Nile and up at the indifferent stars.
The physical tension is coiled so tight in his body his muscles ache. He realizes with a crushing sense of dread that the past hasn't actually released him.
The very people who threw him away like garbage, who assigned a price to his life and sold him into the dark, are now standing at his door begging for salvation.
The power dynamic has completely inverted, but the emotional terror remains exactly the same.
And this is the moment where Asenath proves her ultimate indispensable worth as his emotional and spiritual anchor. She wakes up, sees he is gone, and joins him on the cold balcony.
She doesn't offer him empty platitudes. She doesn't tell him everything will be fine. Instead, she steps up behind him and physically unties the heavy sash of his robe, gently letting the symbolic weight of the empire fall from his shoulders.
She offers him a safe, quiet space where his immense strength can finally rest. She reminds him of the reality they have built together, piece by piece.
She says, "We have seen the abundance with our own eyes. We built the storehouses. So when the famine of your past comes to our door, we will meet it exactly the same way we met the famine of the land, with wisdom, with courage, and with God standing before us."
It's an incredibly grounding moment, and Joseph listens to her. He looks out at the vast, dark night sky, and he makes a conscious, deliberate, and fiercely difficult declaration.
He speaks out loud to the dark, saying, "No, Canaan, I leave you there. I leave you exactly where you left me all those years ago, and I leave the dreams with you. My life is here now."
He physically turns his body away from the eastern horizon, away from the trauma of his past, and he looks directly at his wife. He actively chooses his present. He chooses Egypt. He chooses the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of the family and the nation he has saved.
It is a breathtaking moment of psychological agency. He is flatly refusing to let the unresolved trauma of Canaan dictate his present emotional reality or his future political actions.
He's claiming total ownership of the life he has painstakingly, agonizingly built from the ashes of his brother's betrayal. He acknowledges the pain, but he refuses to let it sit on the throne of his mind.
I am just in awe of how beautifully the author bookends this entire narrative.
Oh, me too. I want to draw a line all the way back to where we started. Think about the prologue. We started with Jacob sitting in the dust of Canaan, trapped in a dark tent, clutching a bloody piece of fabric.
Jacob was utterly paralyzed by a false past, blinded by grief, completely unable to let go of what he thought he had lost. His trauma dictated his entire existence.
And here, at the culmination of this arc, we have his son, Joseph, standing on a high balcony in Egypt, holding the power of life and death, and actively, consciously choosing to let go of Canaan so he can fully embrace his present reality and his future.
It is a stunning, meticulously crafted thematic parallel. It perfectly illustrates the generational movement from emotional stagnation to dynamic action, from blinding grief to clear-eyed purpose.
Jacob was dismantled by his trauma and retreated inward. Joseph, despite enduring a betrayal arguably more intimate and horrific, chooses to keep his eyes wide open to the massive responsibility standing in front of him. He breaks the cycle of paralysis.
It is just an incredible, sweeping journey. We've traveled from a father's stagnant, blinding grief in a desert encampment to a young priestess's daring, dangerous intellectual rebellion against her entire culture.
Ending in a profound partnership and love story that literally provides the logistical and emotional foundation to save a civilization from starvation. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I really want you, the listener, to take a moment and reflect on your own life.
Yes, think about Asenath kneeling in her temple, reciting words she no longer believed.
What golden collars of societal expectation are you wearing right now? What prestigious, comfortable, but ultimately hollow roles are you playing that might actually be suffocating your authentic self?
What might you need to physically or metaphorically unpin, lay on the altar, and walk away from in order to step out of the gilded cage and find your own uncomfortable truth?
That is a vital personal challenge to take away from the text, but I also want to leave you with a broader, perhaps more unsettling philosophical thought to ponder, one that builds directly on the complex political mechanics we've been unpacking today.
This story focuses heavily on the divine gift of foresight. But consider for a moment the sheer, crushing psychological terror of being the only person in the world who knows the apocalypse is coming.
If you knew, with absolute, unshakable certainty, that a global disaster was exactly 7 years away, and your neighbors, your colleagues, and your society called you a tyrant, a hoarder, and a villain for making the harsh, restrictive preparations necessary to survive it.
Would your love for humanity actually survive their hatred of you? Or does true visionary leadership require you to accept being despised as the villain in the present so that you can ensure you are the savior in the future?
That is a heavy, brilliant question to sit with. To accept being the villain now to be the savior later. It really forces you to rethink the motivations of historical figures who made deeply unpopular, austere decisions.
And it takes us right back to that museum display case we talked about at the very beginning.
We think we know the ancient artifact. We think we know the simple Sunday school story of the man in the coat of many colors. But when you really press your hand to the glass, when you read between the lines of the history, you feel the frantic pulse of a man crushed by the weight of the future and the fierce, steady heartbeat of the woman who kept him grounded enough to actually save the world. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Pharaoh's nightmare. We'll catch you next time.
Goodbye, everyone. Keep questioning the stories you think you know.